Hey everyone, welcome back to another emotional story that will touch your heart. Today, I'm sharing a Christmas tale about redemption, unexpected connections, and the power of a child's innocence. If you enjoy stories that make you feel, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what touches you most. Now, grab a tissue and let's begin. The snow fell like frozen tears against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sterling Tower, 70 floors above Manhattan's glittering chaos. Marcus Sterling sat alone in his corner office, the blue glow of multiple monitors casting harsh shadows across his weathered face. At 58, he commanded an empire worth billions, yet on this Christmas Eve, his only companions were spreadsheets and the distant hum of the city below. His fingers moved mechanically across the keyboard, reviewing acquisition proposals that could wait until January. But waiting had never been Marcus's strong suit, not since that day 40 years ago when he'd sworn he'd never be powerless again. The office was silent, except for the whisper of climate control and the occasional ping of an email from Tokyo, where it was already Christmas morning and the markets never slept. He'd dismissed his assistant hours ago, ignored her gentle reminder about the time. "Go home to your family, Patricia," he'd said without looking up. Family. The word felt foreign on his tongue, like speaking a language he'd once known but had forgotten through decades of disuse. A sound in the outer office made him pause. The cleaning crew wasn't scheduled for another hour. Marcus frowned, his hand instinctively moving toward the panic button beneath his desk. Then he heard it, a child's voice, high and clear, singing Jingle Bells, slightly off-key. The door to his office cracked open, and a small face peered around it. Wide brown eyes met his still gray ones, and for a moment, neither moved. The child, a girl, maybe 7 or 8, wore a puffy pink coat that had seen better days and held a worn backpack decorated with unicorn stickers. "Sophie," a woman's panicked voice called from the reception area. "Sophie, where did you go?" "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry." Maria Rodriguez, one of the night cleaners, rushed in, her face flushed with embarrassment and exertion. "I had no choice but to bring her. Tonight, the babysitter canceled, and I couldn't lose this shift, not before Christmas." Marcus raised a hand, surprising himself with the gesture. "It's fine," he heard himself say. The child, Sophie, had ventured further into the office, her eyes wide with wonder at the panoramic view of the city lights. She pressed her small hands against the window, her breath fogging the glass. "Wow," she whispered. "You can see the whole world from here." "Not the whole world," Marcus corrected automatically. "Just Manhattan and parts of—" "Do you live here?" Sophie interrupted, turning to face him with the directness only children possess. "In this big room with all the computers." Maria started forward. "Sophie, don't bother Mr. Sterling. Come help Mama." But the girl had already noticed something that made her gasp. "You don't have any Christmas decorations, not even one tiny tree." She looked at Marcus with a mixture of shock and pity that would have been comical if it hadn't struck so close to a truth he'd buried. "Don't you like Christmas?" Marcus found himself at a loss for words, something that hadn't happened in a boardroom in 20 years. The child's innocent question hung in the air like an accusation. He could feel Maria's nervous energy from across the room, see her wringing her hands in the universal gesture of a parent whose child had said too much. "Christmas is for families," he finally managed, his voice rougher than intended. "I have work to do." Sophie tilted her head, studying him with those impossibly large eyes. "But everyone has a family. Even if they're not here, they're somewhere." She set down her backpack and began rummaging through it with purpose. "My daddy's somewhere too. Mama says he's watching from heaven, making sure we're okay." Maria's face crumpled slightly before she composed herself. "Sophie, honey, why don't you come read your book while I clean? Mr. Sterling is very busy." But Sophie had already found what she was looking for. A small box of crayons, worn down to nubs, and some folded papers. She marched to the conference table as if she owned the place and spread out her supplies. "I'm going to make you a Christmas decoration," she announced. "Everyone needs at least one." Marcus watched, transfixed, As the little girl began to draw, her tongue poked out slightly in concentration, a gesture that triggered something deep in his memory. His sister Emma used to do the same thing when she was focused. Emma, who he hadn't spoken to in, God, was it really 15 years? Sophie, really, we should, Maria started, but Marcus surprised them both. Let her draw, he said quietly. He turned back to his monitors, but the numbers blurred together. Instead, he found himself watching the child's reflection in the dark window. Her small form bent over the paper with such determination. The room fell into an oddly comfortable rhythm, Maria quietly dusting the bookshelf, careful not to disturb the precisely arranged business volumes, while Sophie hummed Christmas carols under her breath. Marcus pretended to work, but his attention kept drifting to the pair. When was the last time there had been a child in his office? In his life? Mr. Sterling. Sophie's voice broke through his reverie. She stood beside his desk, barely tall enough to see over it. Do you want to see? Before he could respond, she placed a drawing on his desk, right on top of a contract worth $40 million. It was a simple scene, a family of stick figures standing around a green triangle tree, presents scattered beneath. A yellow star topped the tree, and snow fell in careful dots around the happy scene. But what caught Marcus's breath was the way she'd drawn the faces, each wearing an enormous smile, their stick arms linked together. That's a mama, a papa, a little girl, and a little boy, Sophie explained, pointing to each figure. And see, they're all together for Christmas. That's the most important part. Marcus stared at the drawing, and suddenly, he was 8 years old again, sitting at a scratched kitchen table in a cold apartment in Queens. Emma was drawing Christmas pictures while their mother worked her third job of the week. Draw one for Daddy, Emma had said, even though Daddy had left months before. Maybe if we mail it to him, he'll come back for Christmas. He'd believed her then, had spent hours on that drawing. Are you okay? Sophie's concerned voice pulled him back. You look sad. Marcus blinked hard, banishing the ghosts of Christmases past. The little girl before him waited with patient concern, so different from the executives who usually stood before his desk, eager to please or terrified to displease. I'm fine, he said, his voice gruff. But Sophie wasn't buying it. She walked around the desk, something no employee would dare do, and stood right beside his chair. My teacher says it's okay to be sad sometimes, she offered sagely, but it's better when you have someone to be sad with. That's why I brought Mama to work with me tonight. She giggled at her own joke, and despite himself, Marcus felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Maria had moved closer, ostensibly cleaning the coffee table, but clearly monitoring the interaction. Sophie has a big heart, she said softly. Sometimes, too big for her own good. Like when I gave my lunch to Tommy, because his mom forgot to pack one, and then I was hungry. Sophie chimed in. But Mama says sharing is what makes us rich in our hearts. Rich in your hearts. When had Marcus stopped believing in such currency? He knew exactly when, the day the bank foreclosed on their apartment. When being rich in heart hadn't kept a roof over their heads. That was the day he'd sworn he'd never be poor again. Never be powerless. Never depend on anyone or anything except his own ambition. Sophie had returned to the conference table and was starting another drawing. This one's for your office, she announced, so you won't be alone tomorrow. I won't be here tomorrow, Marcus said automatically. The office is closed for Christmas. Then where will you go? Sophie asked, not looking up from her work. The question hung in the air. Where would he go? To his penthouse apartment, with its museum-quality art and empty rooms. To the club, where other lonely executives pretended holiday solitude was a choice. He usually spent Christmas reviewing year-end reports, planning hostile takeovers for Q1, anything to avoid acknowledging the day. I'll be at home, he said finally. With your family. I don't have, he stopped. How did you explain to a child that you'd traded family for fortune, that every relationship had been sacrificed on the altar of success? Sophie looked up, studying him with those knowing eyes. Everyone has family somewhere, she repeated. Maybe they're just lost and need help finding their way back. Like in my favorite Christmas movie, where the angel helps the man remember what's important. Maria checked her watch nervously. Sophie, we need to let Mr. Sterling work. I still have 6 more floors to clean tonight. Wait, Sophie said, adding final touches to her new drawing. Almost done. She held it up proudly. This one showed a single figure, clearly meant to be Marcus, given the attempted necktie, standing by a window. But she'd added something. Tiny figures on the street below, all waving up at him, and snow that looked more like stars connecting everyone together. See, she explained, you're not really alone. All those people down there, they're like a big family. And somewhere in the city, there's probably someone thinking about you right now. Marcus took the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. When had he become so isolated that a child's crayon drawing could shake his carefully constructed walls? Thank you, he managed. Sophie beamed, then suddenly threw her small arms around him in a fierce hug. Marcus froze, unable to remember the last time someone had embraced him without wanting something in return. The child smelled of crayons and apple juice and something indefinable, innocence, perhaps, or hope. The hug lasted only seconds before Sophie pulled back, but Marcus felt its warmth linger like an echo. Maria stood frozen, clearly mortified by her daughter's boldness, but Marcus raised a hand to forestall any apology. She's very affectionate, Maria stammered. Sophie, we talked about boundaries, but he looked like he needed a hug. Sophie interrupted with the devastating honesty of childhood. My teacher says hugs are medicine for sad hearts. Marcus cleared his throat, struggling to reassemble his executive armor. Your teacher sounds wise. He glanced at Maria, noticing for the first time the exhaustion etched in her face. The way she favored her left foot, the threadbare edges of her uniform. How many more floors did you say you had? 6, sir. But I'll work quickly. Sophie, can read in the break room. No. The word came out more forcefully than intended. Marcus modulated his tone. That is, why don't you clean this floor last? Sophie can. Finish her drawings here. Both mother and daughter stared at him in surprise. Marcus himself wasn't sure why he'd made the offer. Perhaps it was the prospect of returning to solitude, to the spreadsheets that suddenly seemed more lifeless than ever. Sophie didn't need a second invitation. She scrambled back to the conference table with renewed enthusiasm. I'll make you a whole gallery, like the one we saw on our field trip to the museum, but with Christmas pictures. As Maria began cleaning the outer office, Marcus found himself drawn into Sophie's creative process. She narrated each drawing, creating elaborate stories for the figures she sketched. This one's Mrs. Claus, but she's tired of staying home, so she started her own toy company. Girl power. She held up a drawing of what might generously be called a female figure, surrounded by squiggly shapes. And this one's a reindeer who's afraid of flying, so the other reindeer help him practice on the ground first. How do they help him? Marcus asked, surprising himself with genuine curiosity. They run really fast while he jumps, so he feels like he's flying but he's still safe, Sophie explained patiently. Sometimes you have to practice being brave before you can really do it. Practice being brave. Marcus's fingers unconsciously found the drawer where he kept a single photograph, face down beneath legal documents, a picture from 40 years ago. Him, Emma, and their mother on their last Christmas together. He'd been 18, Emma 16. Their mother already showing signs of the illness that would take her within the year. They'd been happy that day, despite having almost nothing. When had he stopped being brave enough to remember? Mr. Sterling. Sophie had moved closer again, clutching a new drawing. Can I tell you a secret? He nodded, not trusting his voice. She lowered her voice to a whisper. Sometimes I pretend my daddy is still here. Not like a ghost or anything scary. Just here. Mama says that's okay as long as I remember the real truth too. She placed the drawing on his desk. It showed 2 figures, one solid, one made of dotted lines holding hands. The dotted one is invisible, but still real. Like love. Marcus stared at the drawing, his throat constricting. Invisible, but still real. How many people had he made invisible in his life? Emma, who'd tried to maintain contact, despite his coldness. College friends who'd eventually stopped calling. The woman he'd almost married before choosing a merger over a marriage. That's very profound. Sophie, he managed. She beamed. I don't know what profound means, but thank you. She skipped back to her art station, leaving Marcus holding the drawing like a lifeline. Time passed strangely in the office that night. Marcus found himself checking the clock less frequently. His usual minute-by-minute awareness of productivity metrics forgotten. Sophie had created what she proudly called her Christmas museum, taping drawings all along the conference room windows. The city lights beyond now served as backdrop to her gallery of joy. Maria worked steadily, occasionally glancing in with a mixture of worry and wonder. Her daughter had that effect, transforming spaces with her mere presence. Marcus watched the child work, noting how she shared her meager crayon supply with imaginary friends, how she sang quietly to herself, how she found delight in the simplest things. Mr. Sterling, Sophie announced, approaching his desk with ceremonial gravity. It's time for the presenting of the presents. The what? I made special ones for you. She held out 3 drawings, each folded carefully. But you can't open them all at once. This one's for tonight, this one's for tomorrow morning, and this one's for when you feel most alone. Marcus accepted the folded papers with the solemnity the moment seemed to require. How will I know when I feel most alone? Sophie considered this seriously. You'll know. It's like when your stomach hurts, but in your heart instead. She brightened. But that's what the last picture is for, to make the hurt go away. Before Marcus could respond, Maria appeared in the doorway. Sophie, it's time to go. We need to catch the last bus. The buses are still running this late on Christmas Eve. Marcus frowned, pulling up the transit schedule on his monitor. His frown deepened. The next one isn't for 40 minutes, and then you'll have to transfer twice to get to. He looked up. Where do you live? Brooklyn, Maria said quietly. Bay Ridge. It's fine, Mr. Sterling. We're used to it. Used to it. How many nights did they make this journey? How many times had Sophie fallen asleep on buses, clutching her backpack, while her mother worked to keep a roof over their heads? I'll have my driver take you home, Marcus said, reaching for his phone. Oh no, sir, we couldn't. It's not a discussion. His CEO voice brooked no argument, but he softened it with something that felt rusty on his face. A smile. Consider it a Christmas bonus. Sophie's artwork has significantly improved the aesthetic of my office. Sophie bounced on her toes. Really? You like them? Marcus searched for words that wouldn't sound like corporate speak. They make the office feel less empty. While Maria gathered her supplies, Sophie made one last circuit of the conference room, adjusting her drawings. She stopped at the window, pressing her nose against the glass. Look, Mama, it's starting to snow harder. Real Christmas snow. She turned to Marcus. Do you think the snow knows it's Christmas? Is that why it falls extra pretty tonight? Snowflakes are just frozen water crystals. Marcus began automatically, then caught himself. But, yes, perhaps they do fall differently on Christmas. Sophie nodded sagely. I knew it. Special nights have special snow. She studied him one more time. You should go home soon too. The snow is better when you're not watching it through work windows. As they prepared to leave, Sophie broke away from her mother one last time. She ran to Marcus and pressed something into his hand, a candy cane, slightly sticky and clearly treasured. For later, she whispered, when you open the first picture, candy makes everything better. Then they were gone, leaving Marcus alone in an office that suddenly felt different. Sophie's drawings fluttered gently in the climate-controlled air. The candy cane left a peppermint scent on his palm. And on his desk, 3 folded pieces of paper waited like promises. Marcus sat motionless for several minutes after the elevator. Doors closed behind Maria and Sophie. The office felt larger, somehow, as if their departure had expanded the space while simultaneously making it feel more hollow. He picked up the candy cane, its red and white stripes slightly smudged from Sophie's. Small hands, unable to resist, he unfolded the first drawing, the one marked for tonight. The picture showed a stick-figure man, clearly him. given the attempted tie and briefcase, standing in front of a mirror. But in the mirror's reflection, instead of one figure, there were many, all holding hands, in a chain that extended beyond the paper's edges. At the bottom, in careful printing, Sophie had written, "Sometimes we forget how many people we touch." The misspellings made it more perfect somehow. Marcus stared at the drawing, then at his actual reflection in the dark window. Who had he touched lately, beyond shareholders and acquisition targets? When had human connections become mere line items on a balance sheet? His phone buzzed, his driver confirming they'd safely delivered Maria and Sophie to a modest building in Bay Ridge. The text included an unsolicited observation. "Sweet kid. She sang Christmas carols the whole way. Mother cried." Happy tears. I think Marcus pulled up Maria's employee file. 5 years with the company, perfect attendance until last month when she'd missed 3 days. Emergency contact, none. Previous address, a shelter. Current wages, minimum plus a small night differential. He cross-referenced with HR databases, finding a note about Sophie's father, killed in a construction accident 3 years ago. No life insurance, no savings. His fingers moved across the keyboard with sudden purpose. Payroll adjustment, retroactive hazard pay, educational fund establishment, health insurance upgrade. By the time he finished, Maria Rodriguez would return from Christmas break to find her financial worries significantly eased. He marked it all as administrative corrections, knowing Maria's pride would accept help easier if it seemed like fixed oversights rather than charity. But the giving felt hollow, too easy. Writing checks was what he did instead of showing up, instead of being present, instead of his phone rang, jolting him from his thoughts. The caller ID showed a number he hadn't seen in over a year. Emma. His finger hovered over the decline button, habit almost winning. Then Sophie's voice echoed in his mind. "Sometimes you have to practice being brave, Emma." His voice cracked on the name. Silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Marcus, you actually answered." I was just going to leave a voicemail. "Like always, I'm here," he said, though the words felt inadequate. How many voicemails had she left over the years? How many had he deleted without listening? "I know you're probably busy. You're always busy on Christmas Eve. I just wanted to. Mom would have been 70 today. I always call you on her birthday, even though." Her voice trailed off. 70. Their mother, who'd died at 38, would have been 70. Marcus closed his eyes, seeing her face not as it was at the end, but from that last good Christmas, the one in the photograph he couldn't bear to look at. "I remember," he said quietly. "She made cinnamon rolls from scratch. The apartment smelled like heaven for days." Emma gasped softly. You never talk about her, about before." "I know." The admission hurt. I'm not good at remembering, Emma. It's easier to forget. Easier for who?" The question held years of hurt. "Marcus, I've tried so hard to keep our family alive, even if it's just you and me now. But I can't do it alone. I'm tired of being the only one who remembers." Marcus looked at Sophie's drawings surrounding him, at the smiling families and connected figures. When had he decided that remembering was weakness? When had he chosen isolation over the messy, painful, beautiful reality of family? "Where are you now?" he asked suddenly. "I'm what right now? Where are you?" "At home, in Connecticut. The kids are asleep. Tom's putting out the presents." "Why?" Marcus stood, decision crystallizing. "I want to come for Christmas, if you'll have me." The silence stretched so long he wondered if the call had dropped. Then Emma spoke, her voice thick with tears. "Are you serious? A very wise 8-year-old told me tonight that everyone has family. They just sometimes need help finding their way back." He paused. "I need help, Emma. I need to find my way back." Emma's sharp intake of breath echoed through the phone. "Marcus, do you mean it? Really mean it? Because I can't have you promise and then disappear again. Not on Christmas. Not in front of my children, your children." Marcus realized with a shock that he didn't even know their names. his own nephew and niece, and he was a stranger to them. Tell me about them. You really want to know? Disbelief colored every word. Please. Well, Michael is 10. He's obsessed with robots and building things. Wants to be an engineer. Like she paused. Like you were going to be before you switched to business. And Lucy, she's 7. She draws constantly, makes up stories about everything. Tom says she has my imagination. 7. Almost the same age as Sophie. Marcus looked at the drawings surrounding him, wondering if Lucy created similar worlds of wonder with her crayons. I'd like to meet them, he said softly, to know them. If it's not too late. It's never too late, Emma whispered. That's what Mom used to say. Remember, it's never too late to choose love over pride. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Their mother's voice, clear as day across the decades. How had he forgotten her sayings, her wisdom, her unwavering belief in second chances? I'll need to stop at home first, he said, mind already calculating. Pack a few things. I can be there by Marcus. Emma's voice was gentle but firm. It's past midnight. The roads are terrible with the snow. Come in the morning. Come for breakfast. The kids wake up at dawn anyway. They'll be beside themselves about presents. A pause. We always set a place for you, you know, every year, just in case. The confession broke something in Marcus. Every year, an empty place setting. Every year, hope despite disappointment. Emma, I'm so no apologies tonight, she interrupted. Just come. Promise me you'll come. A promise. The words felt sacred, binding. I'll be there. After they hung up, Marcus found himself unable to move. The weight of what he'd just done, the commitment he'd made, pressed down on him. It would be so easy to call back, to make excuses, to retreat into the fortress of work and isolation he'd built so carefully. His eyes fell on Sophie's other 2 drawings. Without conscious decision, he unfolded the one marked for tomorrow morning. This drawing was different. It showed a door, just a simple door, but it was opening, and through the crack, brilliant light spilled out. Stick figures waited. On the other side, arms outstretched. At the bottom, Sophie had written, "Behind every door is Simone waiting to love you." Marcus carefully folded the drawing and placed it in his jacket pocket, along with the 3rd, unopened one. Then he stood, looking around his office as if seeing it for the first time. All the trappings of success, the awards, the commemorative plaques, the photos with world leaders and CEOs. But not a single picture of family. Not one image of connection that wasn't transactional. He began to shut down his computers, each screen going dark, like closing eyes. For the first time in memory, he was leaving work unfinished, contracts unsigned, emails unanswered, deals unclocked. It felt like freedom as he gathered his things. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number, but somehow he knew. Maria's voice came through the voicemail, hesitant and emotional. "Mr. Sterling, I just saw what you did. The adjustments. I don't have words. Sophie's college fund, health insurance, that covers her therapy. I can't thank you. She was right about you. She said you had a good heart that just needed reminding. Merry Christmas, Mr. Sterling. From both of us." Marcus listened to the message twice, feeling something crack open inside his chest. Not breaking, healing. Like a bone that had been set wrong finally being corrected. Painful but necessary. The snow fell heavier as Marcus made his way through the empty executive parking garage. His footsteps echoed off concrete walls. A lonely sound that suddenly seemed to summarize his entire existence. Solitary footsteps, in empty spaces, going through motions that led nowhere but back to the beginning. His penthouse apartment greeted him with its usual sterile perfection. The housekeeper had been in everything gleamed, everything in its place. No clutter, no warmth, no evidence that anyone actually lived here. He moved through the rooms, seeing them through Sophie's eyes. No Christmas decorations, no photos, no color beyond the grays and blacks of expensive minimalism. In his bedroom, Marcus pulled out a suitcase. When had he last used it for anything other than business trips? He packed mechanically, then stopped. What did you bring to a family Christmas? He had no context, No reference point. The last family Christmas he'd attended, he'd been 18 and owned 2 pairs of jeans. He sat on the bed, suddenly overwhelmed. The third drawing called to him from his pocket. For when you feel most alone, Sophie's words echoed. You'll know. It's like when your stomach hurts, but in your heart instead. With trembling fingers, he unfolded the final drawing. This one took his breath away. Not for its artistic merit, it was still a child's drawing, but for its insight. She'd drawn a heart, but it wasn't the typical Valentine shape. It was anatomically inspired, with chambers and vessels. And from the heart, she'd drawn lines extending outward like veins or roots, connecting to smaller hearts scattered across the page. Some connections were bold and strong, others dotted and faint, but all led back to the central heart. At the bottom, in her careful printing, your heart is never alone. It just forgets how to feel the connections. Marcus stared at the drawing until his vision blurred. An 8-year-old had seen through 40 years of carefully constructed walls in one evening, had diagnosed his condition more accurately than any therapist or executive coach ever could. He didn't lack a heart, he'd just forgotten how to feel its connections. The night stretched ahead, hours until dawn, until he could make good on his promise to Emma. He should sleep, but his mind was too alive, crackling with possibilities and fears. What if the children were afraid of him? What if he didn't know how to talk to them? What if he damaged them the way he damaged every other relationship in his life? He found himself in his home office. Of course, even here, work called to him. But instead of opening his laptop, he pulled out the bottom drawer of his desk. Behind tax returns and stock options lay a small box he hadn't touched in years. Inside, his mother's ring, simple and worn, Emma's high school graduation announcement, a Father's Day card he'd made in 2nd grade for a father who'd already left, and the photograph, the one he'd thought about earlier, their last Christmas together. He studied their faces. His mother, thin but smiling, her arms around both her children. Emma, grinning despite her braces, wearing a sweater she'd knitted herself. And him, serious even then, but with something in his eyes that was missing from every corporate photo since. Hope, maybe. Or just a simple belief that being together mattered more than anything else. Marcus placed a photo on his desk, propping it against his computer monitor. Then he did something he hadn't done in decades. He went to the kitchen and made hot chocolate, not from some gourmet mix, but the way his mother had taught him. Milk warmed slowly, real chocolate melted in, a touch of cinnamon dot as he sipped it, looking out at the snow-covered city. He thought about Sophie and Maria making their way home through Brooklyn. About Emma, probably lying awake wondering if this was another false promise. About connections visible and invisible, but always, always real. Dawn came slowly. The sky lightening from black to deep purple to pearl gray. Marcus hadn't slept, but he felt more awake than he had in years. He showered, dressed carefully, not in his usual CEO armor, but in jeans and a sweater Emma had sent him 3 Christmases ago. He'd never worn it, but kept it for reasons he couldn't explain. It still had the tags, which he carefully removed. The drive to Connecticut took him through a transformed landscape. Snow had turned a familiar route into something from a fairy tale. Other cars were sparse. Most people were already where they needed to be, already home. The radio played Christmas music, and for once, Marcus didn't change the station. As he turned into Emma's neighborhood, his hands tightened on the steering wheel. Suburban streets lined with houses glowing with Christmas lights, inflatable Santas, and reindeer on lawns. The normalcy of it all terrified him more than any boardroom showdown ever had. Emma's house was exactly what he'd expected and nothing like it at all. A colonial with blue shutters, a minivan in the driveway, children's toys scattered on the porch despite the snow, but also wreaths on every window, lights that seemed to pulse with warmth, and in the front window, a Christmas tree so laden with ornaments it seemed to defy physics. He sat in the driveway for a full minute, engine running. He could still leave, make an excuse, claim car trouble or sudden illness or urgent business in Tokyo. The old patterns called to him, safe in their familiarity. Then the front door flew open, and Emma stood there. Older, her hair showing gray, wearing a ridiculous Christmas apron. But her eyes were their mother's, full of hope despite everything. She didn't move, letting him make the choice. Marcus turned off the engine and stepped out into the snow. "You came," she breathed. "I promised." His voice was rough. "I know it doesn't mean much after all the promises I've broken." But Emma crossed the distance between them in 3 strides and threw her arms around him. Not the polite, professional embraces he was used to, but a real hug, the kind that threatened to crack ribs and definitely cracked walls. She smelled like cinnamon rolls and coffee and home. "You're here," she whispered into his shoulder. "That's all that matters. You're here." From inside the house came the sound of children's voices, high and excited. "Mom, can we open them now? Please, just one." Emma pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Come meet your family," she said simply. The house enveloped him in chaos and warmth. Tom, Emma's husband, shook his hand with genuine welcome, and the children, Lucy launched herself at him without hesitation, declaring him Uncle Marcus, who lives in the Sky Castle. Michael hung back, studying him with eyes that held too much of Marcus's own wariness. "Emma says you build things," Michael finally offered. "I build things too. Want to see?" And just like that, Marcus was pulled into a world he'd forgotten existed. Breakfast was barely controlled mayhem, everyone talking over everyone else. Lucy insisting on showing him every ornament she'd made. Michael explaining his robot designs with the intensity of a tiny professor. "You're not what I expected," Tom said quietly, refilling Marcus's coffee. "Emma's stories. I expected someone scarier." "I am scary," Marcus replied. "In boardrooms, 2 competitors. But here," he looked around at the cheerful disorder, at Emma laughing at something Lucy had said, at Michael carefully arranging his presents in order of opening preference. "Here, I'm just trying to remember how to be a brother, an uncle, a person." Tung nodded. "That's all any of us are doing, trying to remember how to be human." He paused. "Emma never gave up on you. You know, every birthday, every Christmas, every time Michael built something amazing or Lucy drew something beautiful, she'd say, 'I wish Marcus could see this.'" The words hit Marcus like physical blows. All those moments missed, all those wishes unheard. But he was here now. Sophie's drawing had been right behind every door. Someone was waiting to love you. You just had to be brave enough to walk through. The morning unfolded like a series of small miracles. Marcus found himself on the floor. When had he last sat on a floor? While Lucy directed the present opening ceremony with the seriousness of a tiny general. Michael had warmed to him, especially after Marcus recognized the complexity of his robot designs. "This is actually quite sophisticated," Marcus said, examining a construction made of building blocks and rubber bands. "The joint articulation, here, did you come up with this yourself?" Michael's face lit up like Times Square. "Mom said you studied engineering before you became a business guy. Is that true?" "It is." Marcus felt the path not taken stretch before him. "I wanted to build bridges. Why didn't you?" Such a simple question. Why hadn't he? "I thought making money was more important than making things. I was wrong." Emma looked up from where she was helping Lucy untangle a ribbon. Their eyes met across the room, and in hers, he saw forgiveness for more than just abandoned engineering dreams. As the morning progressed, Marcus found himself pulled deeper into the family rhythm. He helped Tom assemble a dollhouse, some CEO. "You are," Tom joked, as Marcus struggled with tiny furniture. Learned Lucy's elaborate system for categorizing her new crayons by happiness level, and listened to Michael explain every function of his new robotics kit with the patience of someone who finally had nowhere more important to be. During a quiet moment, while the children were occupied with their new toys, Emma sat beside him on the couch. "I have something for you," she said softly. "I've been saving it." She handed him a small box, worn at the corners. Inside was their mother's watch. Not expensive, just a simple Timex. She'd worn every day. "She wanted you to have it," Emma said. "In the hospital, at the end. She said to give it to you when you were ready to start counting moments instead of money." Marcus held the watch, feeling its familiar weight. He could see his mother checking it as she rushed between jobs, could hear her saying, "Time is the only real currency. Marcus, spend it wisely." "I've wasted so much time," he said quietly. "No," Emma said firmly. "You've invested it differently, but you're here now. That's what matters." Lucy appeared at his knee, clutching a piece of paper. "Uncle Marcus, I made you something." She presented her drawing proudly. It showed a family around a Christmas tree, but she'd added a new figure, a tall man in a blue sweater. "That's you," she explained. "I put you in the middle because Mom says you're important." Marcus stared at the drawing, struck by its similarity to Sophie's art, to little girls who'd never met, both understanding something fundamental about connection and belonging. "Thank you, Lucy. It's perfect." "Are you crying?" Lucy asked with that devastating directness. "It's okay if you are. Daddy cries at movies all the time." "Hey, Tom," protested from across the room. "Only at the really good ones." Marcus laughed, actually laughed, and realized he couldn't remember the last time that had happened. "Maybe a little," he admitted to Lucy. "Happy tears." She nodded sagely. "Those are the best kind." Then she climbed onto his lap without invitation, settling in like she belonged there. Which, Marcus realized with wonder, she did. As the day wore on, Marcus felt something shifting inside him, like ice breaking up after a long winter. When Michael asked if he'd help build his new robot, Marcus found himself on the floor again, surrounded by tiny parts and instruction manuals, feeling more useful than he had in any board meeting. "You're good at this," Michael observed. "Maybe you could visit again and we could build more stuff." "I'd like that," Marcus said, meaning it. "Maybe I could teach you about bridge building too. The engineering kind." And he paused, thinking of all the bridges he needed to rebuild. "And the other kind?" "The other kind?" Michael asked. "The kind between people," Marcus explained. "Those are harder to build, but they last longer." Evening arrived, wrapped in snow and golden light. The children, exhausted from excitement and sugar, had finally agreed to wind down. Marcus found himself in a situation he'd never imagined, sitting on Lucy's bed, being handed book after book for bedtime stories. "This one's about a lonely star," Lucy explained, shoving a worn picture book into his hands. "But then it finds out all the other stars were always there. It just had to open its eyes." "It's my favorite," Marcus read, his voice rusty at first. Then, finding rhythm in the simple prose, Lucy curled against his side, her small hand patting his arm occasionally as if to make sure he was still there. In the doorway, Emma watched with tears streaming down her face. After the children were asleep, the adults gathered in the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast everything in a warm glow. Tom poured wine, and for a while, they just sat, letting the peace of the moment settle around them. "I met someone yesterday," Marcus said eventually. "A little girl named Sophie, 8 years old. She helped me remember things I'd forgotten, or chosen to forget." He told them about the previous night, about Sophie's drawings and innocent wisdom, about Maria's quiet dignity. Emma listened with her hand over her heart. "Children see truth," she said softly. "They haven't learned to complicate it yet." "Sophie left me 3 drawings," Marcus continued. "Instructions on when to open them. One for last night, one for this morning, and one for when I felt most alone." He smiled ruefully. "She knew I'd need them. Knew exactly when I'd need them." "Sounds like an angel," Tom said, and Marcus was surprised to find himself not dismissing the idea. Maybe, he thought of Sophie's certainty that everyone had family somewhere, that connections never really died. "She made me brave enough to call Emma, to come here, to try." They talked late into the night, years of missed conversations trying to crowd into hours. Emma told him about the years after their mother died, how she'd struggled to pay for college, how she'd met Tom, the joy and terror of becoming a parent. Marcus found himself sharing too, not the sanitized corporate victories, but the real story, the loneliness, the moments of doubt, the times he'd picked up the phone to call and couldn't make himself dial. "I built walls," he admitted. "Told myself it was strength. But walls keep out pain by keeping out everything. We all build walls, Tom said quietly. The brave ones learn to build doors too. I need to change things, Marcus said finally. Not just show up for holidays, but really, change. I don't know how yet, but start small, Emma suggested. Sunday dinners, soccer games, school plays. Just be there. And maybe, Tom added carefully, think about what you want your legacy to be. Beyond the business empire. Marcus thought of Sophie's drawing of the heart, with all its connections. Legacy wasn't just what you built, it was who you touched, who you loved, who remembered you with warmth, instead of fear or indifference. As he prepared to leave, promising to return for New Year's, to call tomorrow, to be different, Lucy appeared at the top of the stairs, rubbing sleepy eyes. Uncle Marcus, will you come back? Yes, he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. I'll come back. Promise. Real promise, not pretend promise. Marcus climbed the stairs and knelt before his niece. Real promise. The realest promise I've ever made. She studied him with those serious eyes, then nodded. Okay, but if you forget, I'll come find you in your sky castle. I won't forget, Marcus said. But if I do, I hope you will come find me. As he drove home through the quiet streets, snow still falling like blessings, Marcus felt the weight of change settling on his shoulders. Not the crushing weight he was used to, the weight of responsibility without connection. This was different. This was the weight of bridges that needed building, of relationships that needed tending, of a life that needed living instead of just managing. Tomorrow he would start, but tonight he would simply be grateful for the gift of a second chance, delivered by an 8-year-old angel with crayons. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of transformation. Marcus returned to his office to find Sophie's drawings still taped to the windows, her Christmas museum waiting patiently for him. He left them up, despite knowing his staff would be puzzled. Let them wonder. Let them see their CEO had a heart. After all, he instituted changes that sent ripples through Sterling Industries, mandatory family time policies, on-site childcare for working parents, no meetings during school events. The board panicked. Stock analysts predicted doom. Marcus held firm, remembering Sophie's wisdom about connections being the real wealth. On New Year's Eve, his office was invaded, not by board members or hostile takeover attempts, but by Maria and Sophie, who'd been invited for a special celebration. Sophie burst through the door, wearing a sparkly dress and carrying a gift bag. "We brought you a present," she announced, "because you gave us the best present ever." Inside was a handmade photo album. On the cover, Sophie had drawn Marcus's building, but instead of windows, each square contained a smiling face. Inside, Maria had helped her create pages of drawings and photos. Sophie at her new school, Maria at her new desk position, and pictures Sophie had drawn of Marcus himself, always surrounded by hearts and stars. "This is for your new office," Sophie explained. "So you remember you're not alone, even when we're not here." Marcus hugged her tight, no longer afraid of the emotion she pulled from him. "Thank you, Sophie, for everything." "I didn't do anything," she said, puzzled. "I just drew pictures." "You did everything," Marcus corrected. "You reminded me how to see." Soon Emma's family arrived, the office filling with voices and laughter. Lucy and Sophie became instant friends, bonding over crayons and stories. Michael showed Marcus his latest robot creation. Tom and Maria chatted about their children with the ease of parents everywhere. Emma stood beside Marcus at the window, watching their families blend. "Mom would be so happy," she said softly. "She knew," Marcus replied, touching the watch on his wrist. "Somehow, she knew I'd find my way back." As midnight approached, Sophie appeared at his side with one more drawing. This one showed two figures, one tall, one small, holding hands and looking at a city full of lights. But the lights weren't just windows. They were stars, fallen to earth, connecting everyone with threads of gold. "That's you and me," she explained. "But also, it's everyone. Because once you know someone, really know them, they're part of your star map forever. And you're part of theirs. So nobody's ever really alone." Marcus looked at the drawing, then at the child who'd saved him, with crayons and innocence and unshakable faith in human connection. "Sophie, you are the wisest person I've ever met," she giggled. "No, I'm just 8, but I'm good at seeing hearts." As the clock struck midnight and the room erupted in celebration, Marcus Sterling, billionaire, CEO, man who'd built an empire on isolation, stood surrounded by love. He thought of his mother, of the watch-counting moments instead of money. He thought of walls torn down and bridges built, of second chances and third drawings, of the way a child's wisdom could crack open the hardest heart. But mostly, he thought of Sophie's star map, of connections visible and invisible, of the truth that no one was ever really alone. They just sometimes forgot how to feel the threads that bound them to everyone else. "Happy New Year, Mr. Sterling," Sophie shouted over the noise. "Happy New Year, Sophie," he replied. "Happy new life." And far below, the city sparkled with its million lights, each one a heart, each one connected, none of them alone. Just as Sophie had promised, just as it had always been, for those with eyes to see. In his pocket, Marcus kept her 3 drawings, not because he needed them anymore, but because they were the beginning of everything. The moment when a little girl with crayons taught a billionaire that the only currency that mattered was love, and the only investment worth making was in the hearts of others. The star map was complete now, connections blazing bright. And Marcus Sterling, no longer invisible, no longer alone, finally understood that this moment, these people, this love, was what it meant to be truly, impossibly, wonderfully rich.